Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Listen Up podcast. Today I have a guest, Uri Manor. So, Yuri, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Uri. I'm a assistant professor at the University of California, San Diego. I in the Department of Cell and Developmental Biology. I'm also the director of the Goodell Family Technology Sandbox. And relevant to your podcast, I myself was born with congenital severe to profound hearing loss, and my lab does a lot of research on hearing loss, among other things. Yeah.
Okay, and I just sort of wanted to start from the beginning, seeing as we both have hearing loss and we both have our individual experiences. For you, what were some of the most memorable or notable experiences from growing up with hearing loss?
Uh, Unfortunately, most of my memories growing up with hearing loss are a little bit negative or focused on sort of some of the difficulties and challenges with it. Um, I always felt like I couldn't keep up socially
Mhm.
because, I mean, to this day, I have a hard time understanding what children are saying because the way kids speak.
Yeah,
But when I was a kid, I also could not really keep up with noisy conversations and noisy conditions. And so I always felt like socializing was pretty hard. So I ended up becoming kind of a loner.
mm,
And I think kids need friends, right? So I was probably not the happiest kid always as a result of that. Um, Same thing with classroom. I actually wasn't that great of a student, probably because I missed a lot in what the teacher was saying. Um, And I think the worst of it is that kids being who they are, and also it was a different era. I think the 80s were not the same as today,
yeah,
not where I grew up. So um, there was some bullying, and it probably wasn't even as bad as it could have been, or as some people have experienced in terms of like, some people are really bullied, right? Like they're you know, I don't even know. Like there's a broad spectrum of bullying, but I just remember whenever someone made fun of me for my hearing aids or not hearing what someone said, it really kind of stung and impacted me and, made me wish that I wasn't to some extent, that I wasn't who I was, basically. Like why do I have to be this way kind of thing? Um, But there were some positives too. I had a speech therapist
mm,
who I remember very fondly. Um, she worked with me for years, and she really cared about me and was patient with me. And I think one thing that people have commented on is usually people with my level of hearing loss, their speech is not as
yeah,
clear. And I think I can give her a lot of credit for that. Um, so those are the biggest memories from me. I also to this day,
mhm.
I cannot swim wearing hearing aids,
Yeah,
and I love swimming. I love the ocean. I love pools, and I can't really hear what people are saying in the
mm,
pool. I can read lips a little bit, and I can sort
yeah,
of play, but it was always like a thing where it's like I have to make a decision. Am I gonna be a part of a conversation, or am I now entering this other realm that I exist in where I mostly just can't hear what anyone else is saying and I'm just in my head.
yeah. I think
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on sort of an aspect of growing up with hearing loss that's really important because I I oftentimes would have liked to look at sort of the more positive sides, but there were a lot of times during like growing up, sort of feeling different is never easy. And there were definitely times in my sort of growing up where I felt very much on the outside of everything. And I think a lot of it was that I didn't want to be seen as a burden. So if I couldn't like hear what people were saying, or if I had a hard time adjusting socially, I usually would sort of just take myself out of it instead of like advocating for myself, which is really, really important. And so I think stressing sort of the hardships is always really important to touch on. And I also had a really nice speech therapist. I sort of had a rocky road where um, I went through, I think, three different speech therapists, and initially it really wasn't working. But after some time, I found a speech therapist that was really patient and really put in the work to sort of negotiate with me and figure out what would work best for me. And that made a big impact on me and my speech because it's truly incredible that I have sort of reached the level of speech that I have, especially since being so young and not being able to hear all of these different sounds, it gets really difficult to be able to pronounce things the same way that other people do. And so that was a big impact. And of course, swimming is always, I struggle with that too. Whenever I go to the beach, I'm like, oh, should I go in the water and swim with my friends, or do I want to sort of, hear other people and hear what's going on? And so there's kind of that trade-off there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I hear everything you're saying. But a really good point about not wanting to be a burden.
Hmm.
One thing I remember very clearly, and I think I've written about this before, was, in these noisy classroom or playground events, one thing that happens with kids is someone will say something and everyone will laugh. And if I didn't hear what was said, I would sometimes either I'd make a decision, am I going to laugh along and fake,
Yeah.
like pretend I heard or got the joke, or was I not going to laugh and then feel or seem like I don't get the joke? And I
Mhm.
remember being very self-conscious that sometimes I wouldn't understand what someone was saying, and I couldn't tell if they were laughing at me or something else. And
Mhm.
or I just did not know the exact question they had asked me or what they had said. And instead of telling them I didn't understand what you said, can you repeat that? I would just try to guess.
Yeah.
And sometimes I guessed wrong, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it
And
can be a little bit awkward. I remember there's a lot of times where I won't hear what someone has said, but I've already asked them multiple times to repeat themselves. And so I'll end up just laughing. And sometimes it's really
yeah,
not something to
yeah.
laugh about. And so it's gotten
Well,
me in
sometimes
some
you feel
tricky
bad for them. It's
situations.
like, oh my God, this must really suck for you to have to repeat yourself, even once, let alone two or three times.
Mm.
So I'm going to release you now, and I'm going to laugh. And say, oh yeah, 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 that's great. And then
Yeah.
they'll like move on. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, sometimes when I guessed wrong, like whatever they said, or I just gave an answer or whatever, said something that completely did not make sense.
Yeah.
I then became self-conscious, and again, the bullying. It's like almost, I don't know if this counts as a microaggression, but like
Yeah.
you could sort of sense that the kids, they're like, is this guy dumb? So I also grew up with this insecurity of like everyone thinking that I was dumb because I never understood what the heck anyone was talking about. And by the time I understood it, it was 5 minutes past. So it was like I was slow in a way to pick up on whatever information was trying to be transferred at the time. So it was hard. Yeah, I would say it was
Yeah.
really hard. And I I think because of the somewhat bullying, insecurities, whatever, took me a really long time to get to the point where I felt comfortable asking for accommodations.
Hmm.
And to this day, it is still. sort of an unpleasant kind of lift for me
Yeah.
to tell anyone, hey, can you please do this or let me do that so that it's easier for me.
Hmm.
It just kind of feels entitled. Like,
Yeah.
uh, why should you have to adjust your behavior or whatever your flow is to accommodate me? Maybe I should just work twice as hard so that
Mm.
we can still make this work together. And a lot of times that's the path I choose is I just figure out ways to compensate so that I don't have to ask for help, um, which doesn't always work out so well.
Yeah. I think sort of going on that same thread from early childhood, sort of how you then delved into your current career path, sort of what did your path look like, and maybe what were some of the ups and downs of getting to where you are today in your job?
Um, as it turns out, huge chunks of my job can be done without having to talk to anyone.
Mm,
Like I do a lot of writing and reading. And then as it turns out, the kind of science I do is very visual. I'm a microscopist. So there was actually a moment where, and this may have happened to you, every now and then something happens to your hearing aids
hmm.
and they break
Yeah.
or runs out of batteries, something, and you find yourself out in the world unable to hear. And there was a period, I think, where my hearing aid broke, like, and I didn't have a backup pair, and it was going to take days. And I started asking myself, like, what if I had been born at a different time when there weren't hearing aids? What would my life be, and how would I be useful? And
Mm,
then, yeah, and today, like, if something happened, how could I still be useful? And I decided that I'm pretty good at noticing things and analyzing things visually, and I would probably do something like photography or something like that. This was before I knew about microscopes.
hmm.
And perhaps not coincidentally, I ended up discovering microscopes and becoming a pretty decent imaging scientist. Uh, so that's how I ended up.
Yeah.
I think most of my success as a scientist is one way or another connected to my skills as a
Mhm.
microscopist. You know, I naturally gravitated to labs that do imaging and managed to train with really good labs that do imaging. And as it turns out, the inner ear, the cochlea,
Yeah.
is one of the most beautiful structures in the biological kingdom. And it's actually been a long time favorite tissue to image by the microscopy community. So my PI, the person I did my PhD with, he didn't have hearing loss,
Hmm.
but he was a brilliant microscopist. He is a brilliant microscopist. So the inner ear sensory cells were a great place for him to be able to do the kind of science that he was really good at.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of a funny coincidence, right? That I prefer visual things because of my hearing loss. And it turns out that studying hearing is a great thing to do visually.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
actually how I ended up studying hearing loss. I didn't become a scientist thinking, wow, I have hearing loss and I need to work on this. Never even occurred to me, really, honestly. I was a physicist and I
Mhm.
was interested in understanding how biological systems sense magnetic fields. And then it turns out that the models for how cells could sense magnetic fields is very similar to the model for how cells can sense sound.
Mhm.
And that's something that was actually studyable. And there was labs working on it. So that's what I ended up working on. I guess I should mention my physics background is probably not a coincidence either because it's again, it's not a very verbal science,
Hmm.
it's mostly equations. So in class, when a professor writes a set of equations on the board, you can just copy them and mostly follow.
Yeah.
Unlike biology, where someone's just talking, with a really weird set of words and terms that are not part of our normal language. And I don't know about you, but one of the weird paradoxes is that in a weird way, my hearing is getting worse. Everyone's hearing gets worse with age. But at least so far, my speech perception, my ability to understand what people are saying to me is better than it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I have a dictionary in my head now that I'm very familiar with. I've read all the pages in my dictionary hundreds of times. So when someone speaks to me, there's a limited number of words they could have possibly said. And I can very quickly reference my dictionary and say, that's this. I can reconstruct the sentence they said to me, even if I didn't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I only hear patches.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting to me. But then, like when you're learning a new subject like biology or anything, and it's a bunch of words you've never heard before, you don't have that benefit, and you're right back to square one. I have the same problem with accents,
Yeah.
especially yeah, because I only hear the vowels, and accents mainly change the vowels. It's how do you pronounce your e's and your o's and your u's and your a's, right?
Mhm.
That mostly like between a British accent or an American accent, for example, or any language, right? So that's a real struggle for me still.
Yeah. I think I really liked how you sort of touched on that, like to sort of get where you are in your job today. It really wasn't that, oh, I have hearing loss, so therefore I'm going to study hearing loss. It's really just natural and it was sort of just instinctual. And it's really like a full circle moment that you just happen to have found your passion in something that you have yourself. So I think that's really interesting. And also, um, you talked about sort of speech perception, being able to understand what other people are saying. I also have a hard time with differentiating between accents, and it's really sort of, I mean, I grow up in America. I get used to this American accent. It's so hard for me to understand any sort of British accent when people are talking very quickly. And so in order to sort of go in between these different accents, I really have to like pay very close attention and put in a lot of work. And so I think it's interesting like how much more work we as hard of hearing people have to do versus just people with average hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exhausting, right?
Hmm.
I consider myself a pretty strong introvert. Like I
Hmm.
don't tend to seek out that much interaction, although I love my friends and my family and all that. Like I'm pretty happy often being alone. And I wonder sometimes if that would have been the case if hearing wasn't so challenging, because it does feel exhausting
Yeah.
to people, and it is physically exhausting. Because they say that extroverts are energized by
Yeah.
conversations and introverts are drained by it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah. I can just handle a certain amount and
Hmm.
then it's too much. Gotta go.
Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
our social battery is so much shorter. Like even when I'm with people that I really enjoy spending time with, I'll come back home and I just really need to rest and take a break because it's also, of course, it's physically exhausting because our brains just have to work so much harder given
Yeah.
that we have hearing loss. And so that's sort of something that I've had to get used to. And I think also just filter into my everyday life that just tell myself that it's okay for me to take a break and to just take my cochlear implants off for a little bit and just kind of sit in silence and
Mhm.
recharge. And so I think that's been very important for me.
Yeah. Do you take them out when you sleep?
Yeah, I have to. And I really wouldn't have it any other way. It's really nice when I can wake up
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
just hear my family members complaining about the construction and I ha didn't have to hear it. So there's a lot of upsides, honestly, to
Yeah.
just being
That
able
is
to
one,
unplug.
that's a key upside,
Yeah.
very key upside. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of I want to get back to sort of what an average day in the life sort of looks like for you in your job. I know that sort of every day can be different and focus on sort of um, different aspects. But what do you think if you could just compose it into um, a day? What do you think your day tends to look like?
As you said, it can vary quite a lot
Mhm.
throughout the year. Turns out right now I'm in the middle of teaching two classes.
Yeah.
So a lot of my day is either the actual teaching where I'm lecturing or I'm preparing materials for the lecture, or for one of my classes, I'm evaluating students. So that takes quite a bit of time. And then there's emails, the never-ending stream of emails from students and from colleagues and uh, just work stuff.
Mhm.
But one thing I spend quite a bit of time doing that I didn't think I was going to be spending as much time doing is writing grants. I never imagined how many hours I would be spending writing uh, proposals for funding.
Mm.
And that is a very specific kind of writing, and it's a lot of work. And it typically involves I need to have data, and results from my lab. So a lot of times there's emails or Slack or meetings with different members of my lab to explain what I need, where they're at, and then how do we get that data into a format that I can then use in my grant. And when it gets really intense, I like to get up super early and get into lab before anyone else shows up so that
Yeah.
no interruptions and I can just do deep work. I spend quite a bit of time still looking at the raw data
Mm.
or, yeah, doing analysis, like the actual science. I spend much less time than I used to
Mhm.
the, in the lab, like at the microscope or at the bench. I haven't really done much of that as much lately, as I would have liked. But yeah, these grants are 5 years long. So once I get a couple, I will probably shift my balance of time away from grant writing and back more to being at the bench with my lab members and getting more involved in like the active part of science.
Mhm.
Spend a lot of time writing and editing papers. Also, we're publishing all the time and a lot of meetings with
Mhm.
collaborators, members of the lab. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
meetings, writing, a lot of reading and writing. I'm always reading.
Yeah. I think
And yeah,
now that you've sort of outlined what your day can look like, I wanted to ask, what do you find are some of the highlights, either from where you are currently or maybe sort of back when you were um, more integrated into the lab and the actual science, what you found were your favorite aspects?
like when I was in the lab, but versus where I am now, what are my favorite aspects? Like Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I'm in the lab and I'm at the microscope and
Hmm.
I get to see a sample with a result, those are some of the happiest moments. First of all, if you have a really well prepared, really well executed experiment and the tissue is perfect and the cells are labeled perfectly and you look at them in the microscope, it's not for everyone, but for me, looking at these structures on the microscopic level, sometimes nanoscopic level, I think it's so beautiful.
Hmm.
Like the analogy I use is like if you like looking at a landscape photo or photos of nature, right? Like flowers, trees, clouds, ocean, all the things that we think of as beautiful nature. I see the same thing in the cellular
Hmm.
microscopic level because I could see the organization of things and I could see the patterns and the distributions, and they look visually beautiful to me. And I try to never lose that sense of awe that we were able to see it. The only reason we could see these things is because so many geniuses before us put in blood, sweat, and tears to build the technology and the knowledge that now allows us to take all of those tools and put them together to see something. So that's even if the experiment didn't yield any new insight, I still get pleasure
Hmm.
out of it because it's like a beauty. There's like a an aesthetic quality to it.
Yeah.
But then if the experiment was executed in a way that I can see some new kind of organization that has never been reported before for a moment, you're the only person in the world that knows how that thing works. And you just can't wait to tell the world, like, look what I found. Come here, come look at this. Like, I want to tell everyone in the lab and I want to I want to publish it. And then the actual act of publishing for the first time and telling the world, here's what we found. So fun. So fun. So I love that part. And that part has gotten better recently, actually. So I don't know how much you follow academic science or publishing, but there's been a long running debate about journals. So when
Hmm.
you write a paper, you send it to some journal, and then the editor sends it to reviewers, and then they critique the paper. They say, you said this, but I don't believe it, or, that's not quite right. And you have to edit the paper, send it again, edit it again. And by the time the paper is published, it's a year and a half since you actually collected all the data. And by then I'm bored with it. I'm like, this is such old news. I don't even want to look at this paper ever again. And it's a brutal process.
Hmm.
I think one of the most important things, especially for people like you and I, is to learn how to accept yourself, get to know yourself, accept yourself, and then love yourself for who you are.
Hmm.
And that requires a certain amount of self actualization and a certain amount of thick skin to not caring as much what other people think. Certainly not tethering your self worth to what other people think. That's a very toxic thing to do, is to decide if this person doesn't think I'm great, then I must not be great,
Hmm.
right? You can't do that. It's so important to learn not to do that. But unfortunately, when it comes to papers and grants, what the reviewers think dictates the outcome. And all of a sudden, your livelihood, your productivity, your funding does, in fact, depend very much on what other people think. And if they don't think you're great, you're not getting that money, you're not getting that paper out. So that has been a long running problem that I think means that this career isn't for everyone. I think
Yeah.
you really have to have a certain kind of disposition, unfortunately, for better or worse, to be able to deal with that. So back to my point about publishing, the physicists and computer scientists have long been using something called preprints,
Mm,
where they would upload their paper for the whole world to read to the internet and then send it for review. And even if
mm,
the reviewers require 2 more years of edits, the paper is still out there. And finally, biologists have really caught up to this. So now we don't have to wait for reviewers to say it's okay. We can put the paper out whenever we feel like it. So that's when I celebrate. That's when I'm most excited, when we have our discovery and we just upload it to the internet and we
mhm.
say, hey, everyone, check this out. And usually, overwhelmingly, people are really excited. Uh, so that's fun. And then, yeah, as a someone who runs a lab, I would say I think the happiest moments for me are when someone in my lab comes to show me something new, something that worked, some new advanced they've made. God, it feels so good. It really does. It really does. It's amazing. I feel like for all of it, I just illustrated to you some challenges, like some serious
Mhm.
psychological challenges with this job. But those moments override all the other things for me, so that this is the best job in the world. And I wouldn't do anything else. I love it. I really do. Yeah.
That's great. I think it's really inspiring how much a sort of a passion you have for what you do, even despite all of the hardships that you mentioned and the mental tolls that it can take, and the fact that these discoveries can just make your day and really just they they make it all worth it.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, you mentioned some of, so the type of person that you have to be or that you have to become in order to pursue a career like you're in. And I was
Mm,
wondering if you have any sort of advice for other people that want to pursue a career in biomedical research, and
mm,
that um,
mm.
what those characteristics can look like.
Well, I was actually just thinking about this earlier. I think one of the cool things about science is the same thing that's cool about humanity
Mhm.
is that there are so many different shapes, sizes, and flavors of people and of scientists. There are the mad scientists. There are the really serious business like scientists. There are the playful scientists. And then there are the incredibly cutthroat, mercenary, competitive scientists. I mean, there's every shape and size. And there are people who are more creative. There are people who are more methodical in how they do things, very focused, completely unfocused, and everything in between. So, really, I think there's a space and a need for all different kinds of people. What I was saying, though, is that you have to have a really thick skin,
Mhm.
and that can happen in a few different ways. For me, I don't think I have thick skin. I think I'm really sensitive, but I think that I'm willing to deal with a lot of pain because the pleasure overrides the pain. Like what I just described to you about the joys that I get.
Mhm.
That makes the pain worth it. But maybe other people, they just don't feel pain as much. They're just not as sensitive, and that can work for them too, right? Um, I also want to say that while I get a lot of joy out of my work, and that is such a gift, there's another aspect to our work that makes it a gift, even if there was no joy,
Mhm.
that the universe has been generous and it decided that it is possible to do work that brings joy and can also make people's lives better. I was talking to a trainee. There are so many PhD students and postdocs now who are really trying to figure out if they want to keep doing this because it's really hard
Mhm.
work. It's a lot of work. It's a full time, not a full time. It's like you got to be on all the time. And I was telling them about my joy in my work and how that for me means that I'm getting paid to do what I would do, and I've said it a million times. If I had $1 billion, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing now, except with more people, more instruments, and more support. I wouldn't stop what I'm doing. I would just do more of it. That's how much I love this, right? It's not a job for me. It's a passion. Um, but joy isn't the only thing that can drive people. In fact, I would argue it's not the thing that drives people most. Um, I explained to this postdoc, I was like, yeah, you got to find the joy. And I was like, not necessarily. Like, what you really want and need is meaning.
Mm,
There are people who have dedicated their lives to, for example, treating children with terminal cancer.
mhm,
I don't know if I would say that they get joy out of it, but they get meaning, right? And for me, that's a huge driver too. The idea that maybe someday, somehow, the tools we build, the discoveries, the knowledge, maybe even someday medicines that we make in my lab could cure disease or at least alleviate pain. That's an amazing opportunity. And that drives me even more than the joy
mhm.
that I from the actual task at hand. I'm just so lucky that I get to have both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you for sort of providing me all of your personal experiences and also what your job looks like and how your path was to get there. And I think it's really special that you have such an undivided passion that you're able to give that out towards others. I think that's really important and impactful in our world. And I really wanted to thank you for joining me today. It was a great talk, and I'm very grateful.
I'm grateful for you for doing this and for the opportunity to raise awareness about what we're doing and what this life is like. And it's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.